I would like you to think back to a meeting or discussion where people were in gridlock, they're frustrated, and emotions are getting elevated. Basically, you have the workings of a conflict. And in the conflicts that I have seen, or that maybe I have started, they're often caused by one of the following things: some misunderstanding, or someone not feeling heard, or more importantly, not being heard, and finally, heated emotions. And today I'm going to share 3 tips to avoid those sources of conflict, and they are to keep things clear, keep things collaborative, and keep things chill. So first, on keeping things clear, if you're having a conflict, it's a good idea to double check, is everybody actually using the same framing of the discussion? For example, my husband and I will have sometimes these really long, drawn out debates. And after a while, we start to question each other's values. We're both thinking, who is this person I married? But eventually we'll realize we're just using different definitions for the same thing. Maybe he's using a more specific, more narrow definition, and I'm using a broader, more general one. As soon as we figure that out, everything's fine. I'll also give a work example. Wherever you work, I recommend identifying a common framing that works for you and your teammates, or your team and your partners. For example, I happen to work in UI and UX design, but no matter the discipline of my partners, almost all our work eventually bubbles up to end users. So user journeys are our same framing. For example, how does approach A affect the user journeys versus how does approach B? Even for an engineering team, they're very familiar with how their concerns are related to user journeys. They might go into the conversation feeling approach B is very costly, way too much work. But they might come out of the discussion changing their minds because, wow, the impact and improvement on user journeys is so high. We agree it's still a lot of work, but it is worth it. So if you're having a conflict, first make sure everybody's actually using the same framing of the discussion. The second tip on keeping things clear is to also make sure everybody has the same understanding of each other. This learning comes from a product manager friend of mine, Lior. Lior noticed that I have this habit of cutting people off when I need to make a correction. And she said, Kat, it's actually very useful to first repeat back what people say before making a correction. She herself learned this when a VP, a vice president, was in one of her meetings. He was asking a question and she could tell I was headed off in the wrong premise. And she figured, let me head this off, save us some time, and explain how things actually work. But the VP said, hold on, Lior. Just let me finish what I'm saying, and then you can tell me why I'm wrong. And that sums up why it's useful to repeat back what people say, because it does several things. First, it makes the other person feel heard. But more importantly, it ensures they're going to be heard because you're going to confirm what they say. And lastly, by confirming what they say, you might find out that you did not need to make your correction. Or maybe your correction or counterpoint need to be on a very specific detail. And then finally, even if you still need to make your counterpoint, the other person is going to be much more receptive because you listened to them first. So make sure everyone has the same understanding of each other by repeating back what people say before making counterpoints. Now, by keeping things clear, it makes it a lot easier to keep things collaborative. And one of the first tips on keeping things collaborative is to make sure that everybody's actually hearing from all of each other. The reason is conflict is not always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet personality who's just not getting any openings to join the discussion. It might be someone who's quiet, who's actually very frustrated, very angry inside because they keep getting overlooked. So my recommendation is to maintain an awareness of the room. Is there anyone you haven't heard from in a while, especially if there's supposed to be someone weighing in? If you notice this, give them an opening. For example, it might be, you told me we haven't heard from you in a bit. Have you seen anything we've forgotten about? A colleague once did this for me. She noticed I've been trying to say something for a few minutes and she said, hey, everybody, Kat's been trying to say something for 5 minutes. Can we hear what she has to say? The funny thing was, I was not the frustrated one on that day. I was ready to eventually make my opening, but everyone else was not making this easy. It was kind of a dense and tense discussion. And luckily, I was able to explain something the group had forgotten about, and it completely cleared up the argument. So maintain an awareness of the room and make sure that everybody's actually hearing from all of each other. Now, the second tip on keeping things collaborative is it's very helpful to identify ways to empathize with each other. And one of the approaches I like using is to ask people to think about solutions for each other's problems. For example, my team is currently launching a very big, complicated project. We need a lot of support from a lot of partners. And one of the partners asked for an exception. What we did was ask them to think of ways to meet their needs that did not have to add to the exception list, because they're aware one of our needs is that we want to keep that exception list small, logical, very easy for users to understand. As a result, we arrived at a good compromise, and the teams also came away with stronger empathy for each other because we spent some time thinking about each other's needs. I'm going to point out, in terms of collaboration and conflict too, very rarely are everybody's needs completely unrelated. You'll often find when thinking about each other's issues that they're often not completely separatable, and it's a great way to find common ground, common interests. Now, you might start things off clear, and you might start things off collaborative, but eventually, sometimes emotions get heated anyway. And when emotions get heated, things get murky, things get not so collaborative, and that is why it's important to also keep things chill. And if a room is already heated, one of the things you might have to do first is chill the room down, which might mean apologies are in order, and you might be the one who has to take the initiative. For example, in those long debates my husband and I sometimes have, inevitably, we both do things that are unfair, unproductive, and it just doesn't get any better until one of us takes a step back and acknowledges, you know, I'm sorry, I overreacted, and it wasn't called for, it wasn't helpful. And that opens the door for the other person to also take a step back and admit, yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have misassumed this of you. That also wasn't called for, and it wasn't productive either. I also point out that humor is sometimes a great tool in chilling a room down. In that complex project I mentioned earlier, one of the team members brought in another person to one of the reviews. And at some point, the new person asked, hey, on that screen, have we thought about using checkboxes? And I'm thinking, we just got rid of checkboxes. But luckily, it occurred to me that it wouldn't be useful to be annoyed or frustrated, even if it's probably technically justified. And it occurred to me maybe using humor would be effective here. So I will say I actually use kind of the same words, but just deliver them in this cartoony, over-the-top way. It's like, oh no, we just got rid of checkboxes. And I cannot tell if you are laughing or not, but you'll just have to trust me that it was funny that day. It was effective. People understood right away that bringing a new person in should not mean we have to rewind decisions we all carefully made over the last 2 weeks. So let's keep the decisions that were vetted, move forward from them. So if you need to chill the room down, this might mean apologies are in order, or a little use of humor will help. Now, my last and final tip on keeping things chill is it can be very useful to use a chill tone of voice and a chill choice of words. The reason is that people hear tone and wording way more than they hear content and substance. It could be life or death information that you're delivering. It could be you're completely right. It could be that you are justified and the other party should have known better. But when we make people feel guilty or shamed, it is more likely to elicit a reaction of defensiveness. For example, when my husband and I sometimes have a big reaction to something our kids do, maybe something unsafe, maybe something rude, do you think the reaction is like to apologize and correct? Like, oh no, I'm sorry. let me fix that. I won't do it next time. No, the reaction, the instinct is to maybe deny what happened or maybe to downplay how bad it was. And I'm going to say it's not that much different for adults. It's human nature. And I'm going to say maybe I am also guilty of this defensive reaction. But denying facts does not help resolve conflicts. So as much as possible, it helps to have a neutral, matter-of-fact tone of voice, no matter the content you're delivering. And as for chill choice of words, I statements and we statements are very helpful. There's things like, when this happens, I feel, or we have noticed that typically this is how it goes. Saying things in this way helps prevent us from overgeneralizing on the other party. It reduces defensive reactions. I'll also point out that you may, over time, identify certain phrases that work for you. I can tell you that never and always are words that are very tricky to use without eliciting a defensive reaction. Similarly, starting a correction with the word no. No, that's not actually how it works, versus, oh, that's not actually how it works. There's a big difference. It lands more softly when you don't start a correction with the word no. So as much as you can, use a chill tone of voice and a chill choice of words. And that is how to keep things clear, keep things collaborative, and keep things chill. I'm going to end this by noting that it is often easier said than done, but I can tell you that it gets better with practice. Because while I said, luckily I remembered to use humor that day, it wasn't so much luck. It was that I had tried it once before. Maybe I forgot to use it in a few times between then, but I remembered it that day. And so I hope that for you, that you will remember that you can resolve conflict or even prevent it by keeping things clear, keeping things collaborative, and keeping things chill. Thank you, and see you next time.